Walking away creates an immediate void, a psychological vacuum that the mind struggles to fill. The sudden absence of someone, whether a partner, friend, or even a toxic presence, throws the brain into a state of panic. The human mind craves stability, and when someone disappears without warning, it interprets the loss as a direct threat. The nervous system reacts as if facing physical danger. Heart rate spikes, thoughts race, and the person left behind cycles through confusion, anger, and despair. This is the mind's way of trying to regain control, of forcing reality to make sense again. Some react with numbness, shutting down completely to avoid the pain. Others spiral into an obsessive need for answers, desperate to understand why they were left behind. Rejection sensitivity and the fear of being left behind. Being abandoned cuts deeper than most other emotional wounds. It's not just about missing someone, it's about what their departure implies. Rejection confirms every hidden insecurity, every quiet fear of not being enough. Some people can brush it off, rationalizing that the relationship simply ran its course. Others, especially those with abandonment trauma, take it as proof of their own worthlessness. This fear doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's rooted in early experiences, often tied to childhood neglect, emotionally unavailable parents, or past betrayals. The person left behind is not just mourning the loss of someone, they are mourning every rejection they've ever felt. The pain compounds, twisting into a deep, gnawing anxiety that demands resolution. But there is none. Some will do anything to avoid this feeling. They chase after the one who walked away, degrading themselves in the process. They beg, they promise to change, they rewrite history in their minds, convincing themselves it wasn't that bad. Others lash out, fueled by the anger of being discarded like an afterthought. No one likes to feel disposable, yet that's exactly how abandonment makes people feel. Denial as a defense mechanism. When reality is too painful to accept, the mind creates its own version. Denial is the brain's way of protecting itself, but it only prolongs the suffering. The person left behind convinces themselves that this isn't real, that the one who walked away will come back. They misinterpret silence as hesitation, distance as a test. They cling to the idea that this is temporary, because accepting the truth would mean accepting that they weren't as important as they thought. This is where the obsession begins. They stalk social media, analyze old messages, replay conversations, looking for hidden meanings. Their mind becomes a prison of endless what ifs and if onlys. The past is rewritten to fit their narrative. They see the one who left not as a person with flaws, but as an idealized version of themselves, a lost savior, a soulmate who made a mistake. And when reality finally crashes down, when they realize that the goodbye was real, that the door isn't just closed but locked, that's when the real darkness sets in. For some, it turns into quiet suffering. For others, it becomes something far more destructive. The desperate attempts to regain power. When someone walks away, the one left behind is thrown into a psychological freefall. The loss of control is unbearable. They don't just lose a person, they lose their ability to dictate the outcome. And for some, that kind of power shift is unacceptable. So they fight to regain control. First, they try to appeal to emotion, crying, pleading, promising things will be different. They will say whatever it takes. I'll change. I can't live without you. You're making a mistake. It's not about love. It's about keeping control, about not letting the other person have the final say. When that doesn't work, guilt becomes the weapon. They twist the story, making the one who walked away feel responsible for their pain. After everything I've done for you, you're just going to leave. I guess I never really mattered. They frame themselves as the victim, forcing the other person into the role of the heartless villain. But guilt has a shelf life. If it doesn't work, they switch tactics. That's when things get darker. Emotional blackmail and gaslighting. Some people don't accept goodbye. They refuse to let the other person leave on their own terms. And when begging fails, they use manipulation to keep them tied down. Emotional blackmail is their next move. They threaten to hurt themselves, to ruin their own lives, all to make the person who walked away feel like they're the only thing holding them together. If you leave, I don't know what I'll do. You're the only reason I'm still here. These words aren't just cries for help. They are chains. The kind that make someone feel trapped, forcing them to stay, not out of love, but out of fear. And then there's gaslighting, the systematic destruction of reality, twisting the truth, making the one who left question everything. It wasn't that bad. You're making things up in your head. You always overreact. The past is rewritten. The pain is erased. The abuser becomes the victim. And suddenly, the one who wanted to leave is the one apologizing. This isn't love. This isn't regret. This is control disguised as desperation. And for those who rely on it, losing that control is worse than losing the relationship itself. The narcissist's rage and retaliation. Not everyone begs when they are left. Some react with something much darker. For people with narcissistic traits, abandonment is the ultimate betrayal. It's not just about losing a person. It's about losing power, about being exposed as someone who wasn't worth staying for. And that is something their ego can't handle. So they don't try to win them back. They try to destroy them. The smear campaign begins. Lies spread like wildfire. Mutual friends turn cold. Social media becomes a battleground. They were toxic. They were the problem. They just walked away like I was nothing. The goal isn't to move on. It's to make sure the person who left is seen as the villain. And if words aren't enough, then comes the real punishment. Stalking, harassment, sabotage. Anything to remind the one who walked away that they will never truly be free. Because to a narcissist, being abandoned is worse than death. And if they can't have control, they'll make sure no one else does either. This is just the beginning. The reactions only get darker from here. Why some people can't let go. Not everyone accepts goodbye. Some people can't move on, not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how. When someone walks away, it creates a psychological wound that refuses to close. The brain fixates, replaying conversations, analyzing every detail, searching for a way to undo what's already done. For some, the pain turns inward, manifesting as depression, anxiety, and self-doubt. They wonder what they did wrong, what they could have done differently. They obsess over messages, pictures, anything that reminds them of the past. They check their phone constantly, hoping for a text that never comes. Every silence feels like a rejection, every unanswered call another confirmation that they no longer matter. But for others, the obsession takes a darker turn. It stops being about grief and becomes about control. If they can't have the person back, they can at least make sure they are never forgotten. The dark side of idealization. When someone walks away, their absence creates a void that the mind struggles to fill. In that emptiness, the past becomes distorted. The brain starts rewriting history, removing the bad parts and exaggerating the good. The person who left isn't remembered as they were, but as something more. Suddenly, they were perfect. Suddenly, they were the one. It doesn't matter if the relationship was toxic, if there were fights, if there were warning signs. The pain of loss twists reality. The person left behind convinces themselves that they lost the best thing that ever happened to them, and now, nothing else will ever compare. This kind of idealization is dangerous. It prevents closure. It keeps people stuck in a loop, chasing a version of the past that never really existed. It feeds obsession, making the person who left seem larger than life, an irreplaceable presence that no one else could ever fill. And when that fantasy collides with reality, when they see that the person who left is moving on, smiling, living their life without them, that's when obsession turns into something much darker. Stalking and digital surveillance. Some people never truly let go. They just find new ways to stay close. Social media makes it easy. A few taps, a few clicks, and they can see everything, where the person is, who they are with, what they are doing. Every post is dissected, every comment analyzed. Who is that new friend? Why are they smiling? Who's in the background of that picture? The obsession grows. It's not about love anymore. It's about knowing, about control, about refusing to be erased. And for some, that's not enough. Watching from a distance doesn't satisfy the need for connection, so they start crossing boundaries. Anonymous messages, late-night calls from hidden numbers, showing up at places by coincidence. They tell themselves it's not stalking, just concern. They convince themselves that if they just see them one more time, if they just talk to them, they can fix everything. But it's never enough. The obsession doesn't fade. It only gets worse. Because deep down, they know the truth. They weren't important enough to stay for. And that realization, that's something some people just can't accept. The guilt of walking away. People talk about the pain of being abandoned, but they rarely talk about the weight of leaving. Walking away isn't always a victory. Sometimes it's an escape. Sometimes it's a last resort. And even when it's the right decision, it doesn't come without consequences. There's guilt, the kind that lingers, that whispers late at night. Did I overreact? Should I have tried harder? Am I the bad guy? No matter how toxic the situation was, the mind has a way of twisting things, making the one who left feel like they are the problem. Society doesn't help. People judge those who walk away. They call them selfish, cold, heartless. They don't see the months, the years of slow detachment, the silent suffering that led up to that final goodbye. And guilt isn't the only thing that haunts them. There's also the fear of what happens next. Walking away means cutting ties, burning bridges. It means leaving behind familiarity, even if that familiarity was toxic. And for some, that's scarier than staying in a bad situation. The emotional detachment process. Nobody truly leaves all at once. By the time someone physically walks away, they've already been emotionally detaching for weeks, months, maybe even years. It starts with small things, ignoring texts a little longer, feeling indifferent to arguments, daydreaming about life without that person. The connection fades long before the goodbye is spoken. But emotional detachment isn't always clean. Sometimes, even after walking away, there are moments of weakness. Doubt creeps in. The mind plays tricks, making them remember only the good times. They wonder if they made a mistake. And that's dangerous. That's what makes people go back. That's what makes them pick up the phone, send a text, reopen doors that should have stayed shut. Some do go back. Not because they want to, but because the uncertainty of the future feels worse than the dysfunction of the past. They tell themselves they'll try again, that maybe this time it will be different. But deep down, they know the truth. Leaving once means they'll eventually have to leave again. Regret, doubt, and the lingering ghosts of the past. Even when someone walks away and never looks back, the past doesn't just disappear. It lingers. It waits. It shows up in new relationships, in quiet moments, in dreams. The one who leaves may never admit it, but part of them wonders, what if? And then there's the fear. Fear of retaliation. Fear of what the other person will do. Some people don't accept being left. They turn bitter, vengeful. They spread lies, turn friends against the one who walked away, do whatever they can to make them regret their decision. No one truly leaves unscathed. There's always a cost. And for some, that cost is knowing that no matter how far they go, a piece of the past will always be watching, always waiting for a moment of weakness, always ready to pull them back into the chaos they thought they escaped. You've come this far, confronting truths few dare to admit. But the hardest step still lies ahead, deeper within the shadows. Subscribe to continue this journey, to uncover what lies hidden, and perhaps, to finally understand the truth. Turning pain inward, the spiral of self-destruction. Some people suffer in silence when they are abandoned. Others make sure the whole world sees their pain. Being left behind feels like a kind of death, but instead of mourning, they punish themselves. It starts small, sleepless nights, lost appetite, scrolling through old messages like a drug addict chasing a high. Then it escalates. Drinking, drugs, reckless behavior, anything to numb the emptiness. They tell themselves they don't care, that they are just having fun, living wild, but deep down, they know the truth. It's not about moving on. It's about self-destruction. They want the one who left to see them like this, to feel guilty, to feel responsible. Look what you did to me. It's manipulation disguised as misery. And sometimes, it works. Sometimes, the person who left comes back, just to check in, just to make sure they are okay. That's all they need. One little opening. One chance to sink their hooks in again. Because if they can't make them stay out of love, they'll make them stay out of guilt. Turning pain outward, the psychology of revenge. Not everyone crumbles when they're abandoned. Some people don't want pity. They want payback. To them, being left isn't just rejection, it's humiliation. And humiliation demands retribution. They don't sit around waiting for closure. They create their own. And that closure comes in the form of revenge. The first step, destroying the reputation of the one who left. The smear campaign begins. Lies are spread, old secrets are exposed, mutual friends are turned against them. They want to make sure that the person who walked away is hated, isolated, made to suffer just as much, if not more. And if that's not enough, some take it further. They send anonymous messages, leave cryptic comments, stalk their social media, making sure they always feel watched. Some hack accounts, leak personal information, create fake rumors that spread like wildfire. The goal isn't just to hurt, it's to control. If they couldn't keep them in the relationship, they'll make sure they never escape it. The role of ego in heartbreak. Revenge isn't always about love. Sometimes it's just about ego. Being left feels like proof of inferiority, like confirmation that they weren't good enough. And that's something they refuse to accept. So they do whatever it takes to prove they've won. They flaunt their new relationships, post cryptic captions, make it clear to the world that they are better off. They manufacture happiness just to rub it in. But the truth is, it's all an illusion. They are still trapped. Still thinking about the one who left. Still measuring every success, every new relationship, against the past. Because no matter how much they try to rewrite the story, one fact remains: someone walked away. And that wound, that humiliation, that loss of control, it never really heals. And this is just one side of the story. The weight of goodbye doesn't just affect those left behind. It follows everyone, even the ones who think they've escaped. Why some people never fully move on. People say time heals all wounds, but that's a lie. Some wounds don't heal. They just get buried under distractions, under new relationships, under the illusion of moving on. But late at night, when everything is quiet, the past comes back. It always does. For some, the pain turns into obsession. They stalk from a distance, waiting for the person who left to fail, to regret, to come crawling back. They don't want reconciliation, they want validation. They want proof that walking away was a mistake. And when that proof never comes, they spiral. For others, the wound festers in a different way. They repeat the same patterns, sabotage new relationships, push people away before they can be abandoned again. The fear of loss makes them cold, guarded, detached. They become the ones who leave first, because it's easier to be the one walking away than the one being left behind. The illusion of closure. Closure is a myth. People wait for an apology, for a final conversation, for some grand explanation that will make it all make sense. But most of the time, it never comes. And even when it does, it doesn't fix anything. The truth is, people don't want closure, they want a different ending. They want to hear that they mattered, that they were loved, that it wasn't their fault. But even if they get that, it doesn't change the fact that they were left behind. The emptiness stays. The questions linger. Some people spend years waiting for closure that will never come. Others pretend they don't need it, but deep down, they still wonder. Did they ever really care? Were they ever really loved? And the worst part, the person who left probably isn't thinking about them at all. The power of walking away, freedom or a curse. People think walking away gives them power, but that's not always true. Sometimes, it just makes them the villain in someone else's story. They move on, but their name lingers in whispers, in bitter conversations, in someone else's private pain. The one who walks away never truly escapes. They are remembered, they are resented, they are idealized or demonized, but they are never just forgotten. And sometimes, they regret it. They wonder if they made the right choice, if they should have stayed, if they left something behind that can never be replaced. Some people think they're free when they walk away. Others know better. They know that some goodbyes never stop haunting you, and now it's your turn. Have you ever been the one left behind? Or were you the one who walked away? Drop a comment below. Let's see how many people are still carrying the weight of goodbye.